Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new episode of F1 2021 Career Mode here on the channel. I hope you're all having a great day. Today we go to my favorite circuit in the world. We are here in Singapore for today's episode. I am very excited, as you could imagine, for this one. I love Singapore so much, would choose this racetrack over any other venue event that I could go to in the world. Canadian GP, Monaco GP, Daytona 500, etc. I would choose Singapore over any of those any day. This is one of my biggest bucket list races in the world here. So hopefully we can bring some fortune on our side here today coming into this GP and get a little bit closer to Daniel Ricciardo in the championship battle here and hopefully go for the win. We kind of threw away a win last season here when we were battling our teammate of Sebastian Vettel on the final lap at Aston Martin in this race, and of course it ended us not even in the top 10 if I remember correctly, or maybe just in the bottom part of the top 10. So hopefully we can maybe get a win here today in Singapore for the second time this season and finally break that streak of only one win in a season. Now in practice, it was actually sprinkling on the track, so we didn't have the best conditions to practice in, and I'm always slow in the practice programs here at Singapore. I don't understand it. Doesn't matter what I do, it seems like I'm always slow in the practice programs here. So it was kind of hard to get a baseline of where myself and Daniel Ricciardo should be lining up for this track here, but I was a little bit concerned coming into this one because of, it seems like usually when we go to tracks that are very high speed, that it benefits our car more than others, but when we go to a track like Singapore that's not very reliant on top end speed, it seems like we are a little bit further down the grid, and we come through to barely squeeze our way through actually into Q1. I only went P14 and Ricciardo only went P9. You see me pause him. That kind of caught me off guard when I was scrolling down the grid. Didn't expect to see Daniel so far down the order. So we come through into Q2 knowing now, okay, maybe our car this weekend isn't as fast as we would like it to be, even seeing Ricciardo down the grid. So just really trying to push the limit with this car already in Q2 just to see if I can find it, get a few extra tenths of a second, maybe even more out of it, and we come through to cross the line and briefly go to the top of the board, but I wasn't confident that was going to make it into Q3, and by the time I come through to start a second lap, I was down to 4th. I had found an extra half a second, and that would be the difference maker in making Q3. We go to the top of the board again, but we would end up dropping down to 10th place, and Ricciardo down in 9th. Look at us, we are way off so far here in qualifying, but thank goodness I made that extra lap to gain the 5/10 of a second, because if we didn't, we would have missed Q3 here in the Singapore GP. So we come through for our one and only lap here in this third qualifying session, and just hoping we can get something good. Ricciardo, he didn't even go for a second lap. He made one lap and that was it. Daniel Ricciardo is down in 7th place. You can tell this McLaren Vodafone right now is just not it this weekend here in Singapore. We definitely are going to need some help here, and it's supposed to rain in the GP. That might be the help we need when we make that switch, of course, going into the dry tires, because it is supposed to dry up in that race, and that could be the difference maker of when the strategy is to switch from the intermediate to the dry compound tire. But we come through to finish our lap here, and we only go in 7th place. So we actually beat Ricciardo and put him down to 8th place. We beat him by a couple tenths of a second, but not looking good for us so far, starting 7th and 8th on the grid. So we have some work to do. Verstappen, Norris to front row. Let's head to the grid and see if we can make up some places here in the Singapore GP.
Against the spectacular backdrop of the Singapore skyline, Formula One returns once again to do battle in what tends to become something of an endurance race, with the notorious sauna-like temperatures in the cockpit making for an extremely physically challenging Grand Prix. We have a high risk of a safety car here today, as the abundance of tight corners mixed with these wet conditions could put a few cars off into the barriers. 23 turns then, 13 to the left and 10 to the right, make up the 3.1-mile lap of Marina Bay. Joining me for the Grand Prix once again is Anthony Davidson. Let's have a chat about McLaren. What do you make of their performance so far this season?
Well, the atmosphere within that team seems very positive at the moment. Everyone seems like they're in great spirits and having a lot of fun doing what they do, and that's definitely contributed to the performances we've seen.
It's time to see how our drivers are stacking up after yesterday's exciting qualifying session. Young superstar Max Verstappen starts from pole position, edging out Lando Norris, who'll start from P2. As we continue through the rest of the grid today, we have Leclerc, Bottas, Yuki Tsunoda, the Golden Boy, Ricciardo, Russell, Giovinazzi and Lewis Hamilton, Vettel, Ocon, Nicholas Latifi and Joe, Sainz, Eilert, Christian Lundgaard, and Mick Schumacher. Gasly, they'll be starting further back after an earlier grid penalty. And Lance Stroll brings the grid to a close. Which of these talented drivers will come out on top today?
There you saw the starting grid. There you see the strategy. Right now it's just intermediate to intermediate, but it is going to dry up before, I think, the halfway point of this GP. So it'll likely be an intermediate to maybe a medium kind of strategy, or just one-stop strategy, just putting on the medium compound tire one time and trying to stretch that tire out to the end of the GP. But we'll decide later in the GP what our strategy is going to be with that once we get into that position here now, as we would get on to the grid. You did see a grid penalty handed out that puts myself and Ricardo up an extra position, so we're now P6. Ricardo now in the 7th position. Pierre Gasly has a lot of work to do here in that AlphaTauri for today's GP. His teammate Yuki Tsunoda on the row in front of us in P5. It's going to be 5 red lights, Verstappen pull, and it's going to be lights out, and we are underway in the Singapore GP. It's a good start for the British man of Lando Norris, who's going to make a lunge up the inside into turn 1 of his teammate Max Verstappen 3 wide at the background. Bottas, Leclerc, Tsunoda. I'm not having a good start. I already lost a couple of positions in typical GOWEN start fashion. As you see, Norris, Verstappen still wheel to wheel as we head down through these next few corners now. Who is going to give it up? I don't think any of them want to give it up now. Norris is in position to fight for the World Championship. Verstappen, he's a ways out. He would need to win to really get himself back into it, so it's interesting to see how they fight, but Norris comes out on top. Tsunoda, a just flyer start for Tsunoda. Into 3rd place, Ricardo with the move up the inside of Valtteri Bottas, trying to make up an extra position here on this opening lap, because you guys know this track a little bit difficult to pass without the DRS zones already, and when there's no DRS enabled because of the rain, it's going to be even harder to pass, so you got to try and make it happen on this first, maybe second lap for sure. Going to be your best opportunities to make some overtakes here in this Singapore GP, at least until the rain stops. There as you see Bottas go wide. There was a little bit of wheel-to-wheel contact right there between him and Ricardo, but Ricardo comes out on top, and it doesn't look like Daniel picked up any damage out of that now, as everybody continues into the hairpin here. As you can see myself just behind George Russell there in that Alpine, and it wasn't a great start for myself. We went from 6th to 8th. We only lost 2 spots, which is better than a lot of starts we've had this season, but unfortunately, like I said, it's difficult to pass, so I didn't know when the opportunities would necessarily rise to be able to make some more overtakes here. I knew Ricardo probably wasn't going to go anywhere either, because of just how hard it is to pass, especially in the rain here in Singapore. But lap 2, my opportunity would come to pass Russell in the DRS zone, just with no DRS here, as I'm going to make a lunge up the inside there. He tried to cover me off. I said, no sir, we're going to be wheel to wheel with the British man as we head down into the right-hander now, as he has a bit of the advantage there, but we have just so much better power and traction right there on the exit of the corner, and we will move ourselves in front of the British driver of George Russell here, and up into P7 we would go. We had about 2.7 seconds at this point to Valtteri Bottas, and I was starting to close that gap, actually coming through to set really quick lap times. I would set the fastest lap of the race here on lap 4. We still obviously had quite a bit of gap to make up, but the gap was coming down 1.8 seconds, 1.1 seconds, so sure enough, we would get to Valtteri Bottas, but the issue was it is hard to pass in the rain. There's really maybe one zone that you can pass, and that's that DRS straightaway, and you can see I got stuck dead behind Valtteri Bottas. Ricardo was stuck behind Charles Leclerc. Leclerc was stuck here with Tsunoda, and then the 2 Red Bulls of Norris and Verstappen, they had driven away and they were with each other, and they were long gone at this point here. But you can see lap 12, I'm still stuck. I can't do anything. I was just along for the ride. I knew the rain had stopped at this point, as you can see, so we were just waiting for the track to dry up enough to where we could put on a medium compound tire, and that's really all it was at this point, a waiting game, trying to gain track position that way, and that transition would be right now. Yuki Tsunoda would come into the pit lane. I see everybody stay out, and I kind of had a double take right there. I didn't know where to go, or a double guess, I guess. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I saw Tsunoda come in. I took the risk, and literally as I came into the pit lane there, you saw Jeff bring up the idea of switching to the medium compound tires. So we, I think, nailed it to the perfect timing that you could possibly ask for there, and DRS now enabled. So the medium compound goes on for both myself and Yuki Tsunoda there in that AlphaTauri, and this is going to be a very, very good opportunity for us here to gain some track position over Ricardo, Leclerc, as well as Valtteri Bottas here. And sure enough, as we would cycle out through to start this next lap, our teammate of Ricardo, Leclerc, Bottas in the pit lane. Norris had pitted as well, but Verstappen stays out on the intermediate tire. But here we go into turn 1 to kind of abuse the track limits a little bit, but we get ahead of Ricciardo with no issues whatsoever. But it's going to be a drag race right here with Leclerc. Not going to be enough. We would have DRS, but I just didn't quite have enough temperature in the car, in the tires yet to really be able to get through this corner well and then make a lunge at Leclerc. So I was actually still behind Leclerc as we came through to the next lap, lap 16. Norris sets the fastest lap of the GP. You see Verstappen's only a few seconds ahead because he pitted so late for a dry compound tire here now, but he's likely going to go to the end of this GP now that he has waited so long to pit here, as we finally use the DRS to get past Charles Leclerc. Is not going to end the fight right there though, wheel to wheel into the left-hander, but we stay ahead of Leclerc. But into the next corner, he would send it up the inside into my right rear and damage his wing. Not sure what Charles was trying to accomplish right there, but he damaged his wing, and he would hold up my teammate Ricciardo, he would hold up Bottas as well, and we would drive away. A very desperate lunge that was from Leclerc. Now, as you see, a few moments later on the same lap, yellow flags behind us, and it's for Daniel Ricciardo. They're the championship leader. Our teammate has had an engine failure on lap 17, and he will be out for the second GP in a row due to a mechanical failure. It happened in Monza last episode. It has now happened here in Singapore. If we win this race at 25 points, we would tie Daniel Ricciardo for the championship lead, which we would not expect with how much Daniel Ricciardo has just destroyed everybody, including myself, this season. But we were on the move. I had finally found the pace I'd been looking for all weekend in this McLaren Vodafone, and we got to Verstappen's DRS. We got to Tsunoda as they were battling here, and you're going to see Tsunoda goes defensive here at the end of the DRS zone. Verstappen's going to do a little bit of a switchback on him right there, but I catch them both off guard, and even myself, I kind of got myself caught off guard. But around the outside we go in a very unexpected pass right there on Max Verstappen, and then by the end of this 22nd lap, now 10 laps to go, coming to 9 laps to go, Tsunoda comes into the pit lane. So we're moving up into second place, and I decided right here, I'm not here to finish second with a two-stop strategy against Lando Norris. I'm here to try and win this GP. Norris pits, I stay out, so does Verstappen. So we are committed to go to the end of this GP, and I think we've played the right strategy right here. I think myself and Verstappen are lined up for a 1-2 suddenly, as Norris was 13 seconds behind, and he was closing the gap, but he just wasn't close enough. You see the engine wear there, and the reason I didn't change my engine parts was simply because I know how hard it is to complete passes at Singapore. I wanted to save the engine change until the next episode in Coda, where we have plenty of long straightaways to make passes. As I can confirm, we will need to take a grid penalty with the parts that we need to change, and we might just completely switch out the engine to get us to the end of the season and fight for this World Drivers' Championship here, now leading in the closing 5 laps of the Singapore GP. I talked about it in the previous seasons at the beginning of the episode, how this is my favorite circuit in the world there, and I would love to win here in Singapore. A bit of a mistake right there, and it would be one beautiful redemption from what happened last season in Singapore, which was all of my own doing, throwing that GP away on the final lap. But here we are in these closing 4 laps. Norris closing quick 8 seconds, now down to 7.5 seconds on lap 29 of 31, but he just doesn't have enough laps to get there unless myself and Verstappen get into a mega scrap and maybe crash each other, make some contact like myself and Vettel did last season. But we come through to the final lap of the Singapore GP, 5 seconds a gap to Norris, and we were just comfortably able to hold off Verstappen in the DRS zones. I wasn't concerned about him there unless I make some big mistake here. I really ran a slow penultimate lap trying to get some temperatures down on the tires so I could try and run a fastest lap here of the session at the end of this GP to get maybe 1 extra point, which could have put us in the championship lead for I think the first time maybe this season, if I'm not mistaken here. But we come through into the final few sections and corners of this circuit here in Singapore for the final lap here, lap 31 of 31, and we are now 1 second ahead of Verstappen into the final corner. Sure enough, we'll come through to get our second win of the season in Singapore. It took 4 seasons, but we finally get a win here in my favorite track in Formula 1 in the world of racing there. And wow, in dramatic fashion there, and we are going to tie the championship because actually, unfortunately, Gasly would get the fastest lap there, and as well, Gasly wins Driver of the Day. Let's head to the podium.
What a great race it's been then. Another classic Singapore Grand Prix, and they've held on to take the checkered flag here today. And talk to me, what do you think it was that sealed the win for them?
Well, this was a real team victory. They put together a solid strategy today that appeared well suited to the conditions out on track. The driver did everything that was expected of them in the moment to really execute the team's plan to perfection, a shining example of how F1 really is a team sport.
Our drivers are making their way out for the podium celebrations, and it's going to be McLaren picking up the winner's trophy. Congratulations to the entire team for that fantastic performance.
There you see the finishing order on your screen. So Lando Norris only gets P3 instead of what he was looking at a P1 finish there, win. Ricciardo with the DNF. Everything just kind of changed there with strategies and whatnot that allowed us to go for the win. And we are tied for the championship lead with Daniel Ricciardo now in these closing 5 GPs I think we have left. Norris out by 3. Bottas, Gasly, Verstappen, they're not necessarily out of the mix, but they will definitely need us top 3 to have a bad race or so. But I would never rule that out. There's still time for that to happen here now. But we have just a handful of GPs remaining in the season, and we have tied it up with Daniel Ricciardo. And you know what was nice is we were actually able to get in front of him before he had his retirement again, like in Italy. So it wasn't like we backed in to beating Daniel Ricciardo and only beat him because he had a mechanical issue there. But there you see USA, Mexico, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, as well as Abu Dhabi to finish out the season there. So a very different range of tracks coming up here to end out the season, and I am very excited to now hopefully put this fight to Ricciardo. But that does it for me. I'll see you guys in the next one. If you enjoyed, you know what to do. I'll see you guys next time. Have a great day, everybody.